Now that you've spent about 5 minutes staring at your Eclipse screen, it's time for that grand old tradition of programming, the Hello World application. If you want to create Hello World on Android and the Eclipse integrated development environment, just follow what I'm going to do right now. Click on File, New, and you'll notice a bunch of items after clicking on New. Some of you will see Android application project there. Some of you might not. For those who don't see it, you can click on Project. For those who see Android application project, you're lucky. You can skip one step. Irregardless of what you see, New Project gives you a wizard that also gives you an Android selection. So whether you get this step or you skip this particular step, everyone needs to select Android application project. That's the project that we need every time we're creating an Android application. I'll click on Next, make sure that I pick that particular part. So we are creating our very first Android application project. Click on Next. Eclipse will think a bit. And then it will ask you for a couple of values. You might ask me what these values are for. First, we'll look at application name. This is very important. The application name is the same name that appears on the phone of your target audience. If I got your app and installed it on my phone, this is the same name that will appear on the Android device that I'm using. So names are very important. A good name usually means that your program will get recognized. Since this is our first app, we'll use a descriptive name for it. You guessed it, Hello World. Notice that Eclipse has also filled in 2 more items on that dialog box. Project name and package name. Both are also important to your project. The project name represents the actual name of the folder where your files will be placed. Normally, it's the same name as your application name. Some people decide to change it. If you want to change it, feel free. I won't. I'll keep it the same. Next, we'll look at package. If you look at your package name, and if you're a Java programmer, you'll notice that it's similar to how we package Java programs, because that's exactly what it is. An Android package is just the same as a Java package. Normally, people use COM at the start, followed by the name either of their company or of themselves, and then the name of their application. So again, that's COM, followed by your company name or your name, followed by the name of your application. Since this is the first one we're making, I'll change this to reflect what I just said. I'll put in my name, followed by Hello World. So I've filled in 3 values right now. My application name, Hello World, my project name, which is also Hello World, and my package name, which includes com, dot, my name, dot, and the name of the application. If we look at the wizard, there are a couple of other boxes that need our attention. There's a minimum required SDK for each application. This is very important because this indicates the minimum device that your program can be installed on. If you're looking at your target audience and you ask yourself, what phones are being sold in my country? What high-priced phones are being used by my target audience? And that answers your minimum required SDK question. If you need a better resource, you're the type of person who wants numbers to back up your target, you can check developer.android.com for the latest statistics on which devices and which versions are being used in the market right now. Last time I checked, Android 2.3 was the base for your minimum required SDK. Most people who buy Android phones right now will not get a phone with a lower version than 2.3. If you're getting something that's below 2.3, that means you're using a really old device. So I'll change that to 2.3. Target SDK, on the other hand, is the ideal operating system that you want your app installed on. So we've all heard about Ice Cream Sandwich, and of course, Google's latest and greatest at this point in time, which is Jelly Bean. You either target Jelly Bean or Ice Cream Sandwich. If you ask me, I'll target Ice Cream Sandwich because most devices right now on the mid to high end carry that particular operating system. In a few months' time, this will be Jelly Bean, but as of this moment, Ice Cream Sandwich is a good choice for your target SDK. Compile with basically means that although I am targeting Ice Cream Sandwich, my application is guaranteed to be compatible with Jelly Bean. And that's what compile with does. If you want your application to be able to run on Jelly Bean, you can compile it with the Jelly Bean operating system. The last one, themes, isn't very important to us. We're starting out. We want to see exactly the stuff that we can do. Themes have been prepared by Google so that you can quickly make your application look professional. For now, we'll leave this with no theme, so that as beginner Android developers, we can see what it looks like when we're developing from scratch. Once you've filled that out, you're good to go. Click on Next. You'll see a couple more items there. Create custom launcher icon. We want that so that there's a representation of the app on your phone. Later on, we'll see how you can customize that just in case you want to put the picture of your dog, the picture of your girlfriend, or whatever picture you may want to get associated with your application. So we want that one. Most of the time, you also want the second one, create activity. The activity is something that we'll go back to as long as we are programming in Android. What is it? Very shortly, the activity is your main application. This is what drives your program. Without the activity, your Android application will not run. So you always want one inside your application. As beginning Android developers, you always want to put a check in this particular section. Why? Because that minimizes the amount of code that you have to do. We don't need to mark this project as a library. We'll discuss that in a further lesson. We will create this in the workspace so that we know where our files are. We can click on Next to get to the next step. And again, Eclipse will process your command somewhat. This is where you can do some further customizations. As I was mentioning earlier, this is where you can pick the icon for your application. The default is the Android mascot. But some people don't like that. If you have images, you can use those. And again, in a later lesson, I'll discuss the proper size for your images that you can use on your phone. It's easier to pick clip art, as you can see now. Clip art and pick it. You get a couple of choices for your application icon. It's a Magic 8-ball app. You can choose whatever to represent it. You want a heart because it has to do with Valentine's. You want the sun just because. You can pick any of the icons there and it will represent your app. I'll pick this weird symbol. You can customize the colors. Change the background. I'll make it red. And I'll change the foreground to white. And you'll notice it disappears. I'll put a background shape so we can see it better. This is now my application icon, and I can click on next. Android has come a long way since I first started doing it, way back in version 1.9. We didn't have all these fancy options then. So you guys are lucky. You're actually coming at a time when the development environment for Android is nearing its maturity. Instead of a blank activity, you now get the chance to pick a full screen activity, login, master detail, or a settings activity. Since we're starting out, we'll pick the default. We'll pick a blank activity. That gives us the flexibility to define our application in any manner that we want. So we're picking blank, and we'll click on next. As I was mentioning earlier, your application needs at least one activity. Your Android activity is the main program that runs when your application is called. As such, its name is important. That's why you're being asked here what you want to name your main activity. And through the 6 years of Android's existence, it's become a custom to name your very first activity as the main activity. And that's what I'm doing here. I'm renaming my activity as main. And then if you were observant, you'd notice the second one and go, well, what's the second one for? A layout is an Android screen. Each application has at least one of those. And that's why you're being asked for a name for your layout. Tradition holds that this one is called literally your main screen. We won't bother with navigation yet. We don't need that. You'll notice that I have an error on my window right now. Main screens are actually XML files, as you'll get to see later, and they are named with small letters. You never name your XML with capital letters. Activities are Java class files. That's why they start with a capital M. So we'll click on Finish, and you can sip coffee, get a drink. Eclipse will prepare your first Android project, and in a bit, we'll actually have a fully working application. We just have to wait for Eclipse to finish processing. Any day now. Is there any way to speed this up, you might ask? Not really. It depends on your computer. But even with the most powerful machines, there are times when Eclipse will really slow down. And you just have to bear with it. This won't take more than 30 minutes. No, I'm joking. This will be done in about 2. If you look at the lower right-hand side of your screen, Eclipse actually shows you a percentage of what's happening. And mine is now at 100%. Yours should be 2. And you should be glad, because once it finishes processing, if you still see this, even though it's 100%, it means that Eclipse is not done yet with any of its administrative tasks. And again, we just have to wait patiently for it to finish whatever it needs to do. On the other hand, if you see something similar to my screen right now, then you're halfway done to your first Android application. You'll notice on my screen that in Package Explorer, we now have a set of folders called Hello World. There's an X mark on it right now because Eclipse isn't done processing yet. Okay. When it's done processing, it should show you something similar to my screen. Again, you have to wait for that X mark to disappear just to make sure that everything that we've done so far has been correct. While waiting for it, we can explore what's inside our Eclipse project. First thing you'll notice when you create a project for Android, a ton of folders are created. The more you'll work in Android, the more you'll be familiar with what those folders mean. When you're starting out, your concern lies in only a couple of these folders. First one you watch out for is SRC. So your SRC contains all the Java files that you will ever create for your Android application. Whether it's an activity file or a supporting class file, all of them will be placed inside the SRC folder. This is where most of your programming work will be placed. Now, aside from SRC, you'll also notice a couple of other folders here. If you're making a game or you're doing something that has a lot of graphical resources, you'll become quickly familiar with the drawable folders. So you'll notice a couple of things here. One, there's a big folder called res, and literally this is short for resources. So any supporting files your app may need, graphics, MP3s, some HTML files, or whatever you might want to add to your application will be inside resources. Resources is simple enough. When you see it and open it, you see a couple of drawable folders. This is where you put your graphics in. Later on, we'll have a lesson which will show you the importance of why there are 4 drawable folders there. For those who can't wait, basically those folders represent the different general screen resolutions of an Android application. HD, high density or high definition, low definition, medium definition, and extremely high definition for your application screen. All your windows are also placed in a folder called Layout. There's a section for menus and for any constant values that you might want to include in your program. Items like translations for Spanish, French, or whatever dialect you want to support are included in these folders. Those are the 2 important places you look at when you first start your Android journey. Aside from that, there's a 3rd folder called Gen that you can look at, but I strongly advise against modifying its contents. This is still important for us as an Android developer. The Gen folder contains configuration files used by your application. And the most important configuration file is a file called r.java. It's something that we can look at, but we can never ever try to modify by ourselves. R.java is updated by Eclipse automatically every time we add a new resource. Some programmers have already made the mistake of modifying R.java on their own, and that has caused their program to crash. Now I see that my Eclipse has finally finished processing while we were taking a tour of the structure of its folders. If you did the right thing, same as me, you get your first screen displayed in the middle of your workbench. What's the workbench? It's the entire Eclipse screen where you start making your program. So you should see your screen like I have mine, and you should see that it has Hello World already up on its center. Okay, before I ask you to do other stuff, you'll notice that there's Hello World here and then Hello World on the title bar. If you're using an Android phone that has an operating system lower than 4, lower than ice cream sandwich, you will not see the icon on the left side. So some of you may be using gingerbread phones or honeycomb phones. You might not see that icon. Again, you can only see that if you're using an operating system that's 4 or higher. In our world right now, that would be ice cream sandwich and jelly bean. So we already have our screen up there. If you remember what we did while we were setting this up, I'll go to Res and then Layout. Remember that I named it main screen, and that's this file. So each Android application you create has at least one screen. Then you might remember the other thing, the activity. That's inside SRC under our package. So these are things that we named. This is the package name we gave our application, and this is our main activity. For people who are familiar with Java, when you double-click on main, Android or Eclipse will load up our Java class file. And again, if you're familiar with Java, this will be like meeting an old friend. Your activity is nothing more than a Java class file. Similar to all other Java classes, it has package information, import statements, and the class itself. So if we look at this, it's a Java class. It's called main. And if we remember Java, the file name, main.java, is capitalized because this is the same as our class name. We have our class name, we have our file name. The main class inherits everything from activity. That simply means that whatever activity can do, main can do. Why would we want to do something like that? It's because we don't want to code everything from scratch. Google has given us already everything that an Android activity class can do. All we have to do is inherit by using extends and then creating our own class so that we can customize activity for whatever we may need for our application. There are two other things that are predefined in the current SDK, the method Oncreate and the method Oncreate options menu. Methods in object-oriented programming are stuff that your objects can do. Google requires us to predefine Oncreate because this is the first method called when you start an Android application. If the Android phone does not find Oncreate, nothing will happen to your application. Oncreate is pretty simple. It is only required to do two things. One, to remember the current state of the phone and any other applications open before it was open. That's why it saves the instant state. And the second one is to call a screen for your application. If you're sharp, you'll notice that this calls the file that we named earlier. Set content view r.layout.mainScreen actually calls the layout that we named earlier on in project creation. The second method we'll look at